Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for June 9, 2024. Today we're talking with Anna Karapetyan. Hello, Anna. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for inviting.
Ողջույն, Anna.
So in the past week, there have been public exchanges between Armenian and Azerbaijani government officials. Aliyev stated that without changing the Armenian constitution, there can be no peace. Mirzoyan replied that the best way to proceed would be to sign this peace treaty within the next month. We assume he meant June or July. He said that the Armenian constitution was an internal matter and the treaty included language that would preclude domestic law and reaching one party's obligations to the other. So we can see that almost 4 years after the 44-day war, Aliyev keeps bringing new demands to the table, while Pashinyan's job apparently remains to essentially socialize these demands with the Armenian public and execute them without losing power. This week's demands, again, changes in the constitution. Aliyev wants an apology for this so-called Khojali genocide, and he also wants Armenia and Azerbaijan to apply together to dissolve the OSCE Minsk Group. Mirzoyan responded strongly to Aliyev's demand to chuck the Armenian constitution, but he didn't respond to the OSCE Minsk Group demand. This seems like an important omission. What are your thoughts about it, Anna?
Not only Mirzoyan didn't answer the point about the dissolvement of the OSCE Minsk Group, but Alen Simonyan, the Speaker of the Parliament of Armenia, in fact, replied to this demand and said that after signing the peace agreement, this issue will also be solved. This is some kind of agreement to this demand of Azerbaijan, because as we know, the fact is that Azerbaijan wants to fix that Nagorno-Karabakh issue is closed forever, and there will be no way to discuss it again in any format. And as a fact, the Minsk Group is now the only institution that de jure has some work to do with Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and Azerbaijan wants to close this point also, not to leave any ways to come back to this issue. And as a fact, Alen Simonyan said that Armenian government doesn't see any problem in this. This means that as Armenian government agrees to close the point and to go on without returning to the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict in the future, and that the peace agreement will be the final closure of everything.
What's the stance of the Minsk Group co-chairs, France, the US, and Russia? Is there a reaction from them?
I didn't see any reaction in the press, but you see the Minsk Group co-chairs had problems with each other working in this format after the February 2022, when the West started to employ some sanctions against Russia and didn't want to work in any format with the Russian government. And this became the main reason why the Minsk Group co-chairs format stopped working. And as a result, after that, we had situation when each of the co-chairs, in this case, Russia and West, US and EU together, started some parallel formats that were not cooperating, but even competing with each other. But this, at the same time, none of the countries made any statements about dissolving the Minsk Group co-chairs format or the Minsk Group format, and none of them made some statements that the Karabakh conflict is solved or that we must not come back to discussions about Karabakh conflict, etc. Yes, they spoke about some post-conflict issues and post-conflict rehabilitation, etc. But everyone understands that the Karabakh conflict is not closed till the main rights of the people of Karabakh are not implemented, and that these people don't have a chance to return to their houses and to decide in which status they want to live in their houses. So everyone, yes, we see now that in some cases the interests are coincident than the values, but at the same time, all the main players of the game and all the co-chairs understand that today's situation is not the solution of the conflict, and that the conflict needs to be really solved.
Mm-hmm.
And now they don't want to speak against Azerbaijan and against this demand, because they want Azerbaijan to cooperate with them and to be in the process of negotiations, and they are afraid to say anything that will give Azerbaijan a chance not to negotiate. But at the same time, Azerbaijan really gets some dividends of this and plays his own game.
Of course, it has been said that pretty much everyone believes that the Nagorno-Karabakh situation issue is not closed, except Aliyev, who goes around and says that he has solved the issue. But it sounds to me like in his request to dissolve the OSCE Minsk Group together with Armenia is an implicit statement on the part of Aliyev that the issue is not closed, even for him.
I don't think this shows that mainly, yes, he understands that the issue is not closed. And also he understands that the power of Pashinyan is not forever. And tomorrow Armenia will have a new government, and the new government maybe will have another politics and will again raise the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and of the rights of these people and the need of solution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And that's why Azerbaijan wants to have some signed documents that will make
I guess they're looking for a
situation...
legal basis for it.
Yes, they want to have some legal basis that will give them a chance not to return to this issue, and will not give the chance to a new Armenian government to raise again this issue.
In this latest round of public back and forth, the so-called Zangezur Corridor was not raised by Aliyev. Has this issue gone away?
No, I'm sure it has not gone away. Azerbaijan and Turkey are playing together this game, and they raise this issue from time to time, but they always, in general, speak about this. If not them, but some other representatives of their government are speaking about these issues, but their agenda is formed mainly now is formed from the issues that they think will be easy to get from the government of Armenia, and they want to get as more as possible. As a fact, we see that Armenian government had already spoken about the changing of constitution of Armenia. Now Alen Simonyan says that they don't see a problem in dissolvement of the Minsk Group format, and so they think that these issues can be easily and quickly solved, and then they will come to other points that maybe will be more difficult to solve with the government of Armenia, because the government of Pashinyan made some statements against the position of Azerbaijan connected to the Zangezur Corridor, the way Azerbaijan sees it.
Asbed, I was going to say that Turkey and Azerbaijan are simultaneously feverishly building railroads. Turkey is building a railroad from Kars to Irdir to Verilag in Nakhichevan. And of course, Azerbaijan, I think they said that they finished building their railroad from Horadiz to Akbend. And that's billions of dollars of investment. So, I think your question is, would Turkey and Azerbaijan invest billions of dollars and then make the issue go away? So definitely, I believe this is, they are essentially assuming that Armenia is going to provide this corridor, at least the railway part. And I agree with Anna that it's basically incrementally feeding the poison to us so that we don't die all of a sudden. So we get intoxicated but don't die immediately. Okay, let's move on to the other major news. James O'Brien made an announcement that he is visiting Yerevan today, Monday, June 10, and tomorrow, Tuesday, June 11. Of course, James O'Brien is the State Department's man to the South Caucasus. Before this, to me, he was known as the no business as usual guy, because after the forced, essentially, depopulation of Artsakh, of the genocide in Artsakh, he was one of the people in the State Department who said that there will be no business as usual with Azerbaijan. I believe in the following week, he himself, I think, traveled to Azerbaijan, if I'm not mistaken, or some State Department person traveled to Azerbaijan. Anyway, it's very interesting to read the announcement, because he says that he's coming here to discuss U.S. support for progress towards the peace agreement, specifically the use of the Alma-Ata Declaration as a basis for the border demarcation process. I mean, to me, that seems like a sub bullet point that isn't worthy of mention on State Department announcement on why he's visiting, but he went out of his way, or they went out of their way to mention that they're also going to discuss the use of Alma-Ata for border demarcation delimitation. So that immediately set off red flags in my mind. Anna, why is James O'Brien in Yerevan at this point in time, and what are his main topics of interest? What have you been able to glean from your analysis?
You really mentioned very important thing, that this underlining of the Alma-Ata declaration in the press release about this upcoming meeting is very strange, because it's not uncommon to underline these kind of things in this kind of press releases. But it shows that, as a fact, it shows that today Azerbaijan really doesn't want to build the negotiations on the Almaty Declaration, and that Armenian government is the side that wants to put the Almaty Declaration as the basis in these negotiations on peace agreement and on about the so-called delimitation and demarcation of the borders. If you remember, when Armenia and Azerbaijan made the statement about the delimitation and demarcation of the borders, starting the process in Tavush, Blinken called Aliyev, and in the press release of their phone call, it was mentioned that Blinken underlined that U.S. welcomes the progress and wants the Almaty Declaration to be the basis for the following negotiations and delimitation and demarcation of the border and the peace agreement. This in general shows that this is some kind of main policy of US today that comes to help the government of Armenia, because the Pashinyan and his team are building their policy on the thesis that Almaty Declaration is the best thing we can have today. It gives us some guarantees on territorial integrity of Armenia, and it will be our progress if the process of the delimitation and demarcation and the peace agreement will be based on this principle and on the Almaty Declaration. And U.S. government is trying to help Armenia in this situation and to push Azerbaijan to agree to this point. But we see that Azerbaijani government agreed to this statement concerning the 4 villages in Tavush, but later Aliyev made some statements that shows that Azerbaijan is not going to follow the same principles in the other ways, and they are going to use the map that is better for them in each place of border. To come back to the visit of O'Brien, I think that in general, again, the O'Brien's visit is coming to show some help to the government of Armenia in the difficult situation inside the country, in the context of internal policy, and also in the policy of negotiations with Azerbaijan. And to show that if Armenia follows the policy that Pashinyan has announced, they will have some support from the US. And I think that this visit is in the context of some showing some good relations with the government of Armenia.
Yeah, I have nothing to say except just to underscore the fact that what you mentioned. I was trying to find references to this as well, but essentially Aliyev confirmed that despite agreeing to this demarcation and delimitation, protocol or agreement, whatever it's called, announcement, they explicitly said that they would, for each segment of the border, they will pursue a map that is more advantageous for them. Is that correct?
Yes, they announced about it for, I think, more than one time. And they showed that they are not going to delimitate all the border based on the map that was used for the Tavush, but they are going to follow their interests. And that means that they are going to force Armenian government to give them new territories and not to get anything for that. As a fact, some journalists have already spoken about it, that in Tavush, Azerbaijan, even according to the protocol that was signed, had to leave some positions, but they didn't do it as a fact, but they got the territories they wanted.
Okay.
Hovik, let's take a break and first of all, thank those of our listeners who have come through to support us. Their one-time and sustaining monthly donations have already started making an impact on our podcast.
To those who have supported us already, a heartfelt thanks. And if you'd like to continue supporting us or if you'd like to explore your options, check out our page at podcasts.groong.org/donate. We are the only English language news podcast that analyzes the politics and geopolitics around Armenia and the South Caucasus on a weekly basis. And in fact, we have the quantity, but not only that, we have the quality, such as our guest today, Anna Karapetyan, whom you probably don't hear in many other venues, in English especially. But in addition to that, we talk to specialists in all walks of life, including artists and business people and experts in diverse areas. And we're committed to 100% fact-based news and analysis. Folks, just a personal appeal and a promise that we are 100% self-funded, and any additional donations that come in go directly to improving our reach, to getting more content, to being more efficient at producing content, and improving our podcast in many other ways. Just as an aside, I would advise you to consider the sources that fund the news that you consume. You can be assured that in our case, it is completely two guys with lifelong commitment to news in Armenia and listeners such as yourself.
Good advice, Hovik. So while we're at this, we'd like more people interested in Armenian affairs to hear us. So our current objective remains to expand our outreach and grow our audience both in Armenia and the diaspora. For this, we have many projects. So we are asking for your support to supplement our own resources and achieve greater results. Go to podcasts.groong.org/donate and become a sustaining member with a monthly contribution. Okay, we're back talking with Dr. Anna Karapetyan.
Anna, let's shift our attention to Armenia's continuously deteriorating relations with Russia. In the past week, two major events happened that we can talk about. One was a visit to Bucha by the head of Yerevan's Nork sub-district, Vagrat Srbazan. He was accompanied by Vladimir Karapetyan, who is the ambassador of Armenia to Ukraine. So it was a pretty official event. Bucha is a very controversial town. It's an event, and there's a lot of allegations, wrongdoing by Russian forces. There were essentially mass graves found there when Russians left, and there's allegations on both sides who those mass graves belong to. But not going into that, obviously Russia is very, very sensitive about this issue. So a visit to Bucha where the participants expressed regret for the deaths and made some other additional potentially pro-Ukrainian statements definitely achieved its goal. And what happened was Maria Zakharova delivered a strong verbal rebuke. I personally thought that was going to be it because Russia was interested in not aggravating the situation. But the following day after Zakharova's rebuke, Moscow sent an official diplomatic note of protest. So they are taking this to the official level. Also, that week, Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, Mikhail Galuzin, gave an interview. And he, in my opinion, it was always clear that this was happening, but he explicitly stated that Armenia is refusing to cooperate with Russia at the level of the Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry. That is a pretty serious official allegation. And then he continued by saying that Armenia's thoughtless steps may make it impossible to return to joint work with Russia and other CSTO countries towards the creation of a common defense area. We know already that Armenia is part of the southern air defense region, and Armenia has some kind of a joint air defense capability with the CSTO. So it's unclear if that is under threat now. Anna, what are your thoughts about all of these new developments? It seems like every week we're going to a new law.
Yes, really, these were two main facts, and this was also happening on the context that the ambassador to Armenia of Russia was recalled to Moscow for some discussions, but today it was announced that he's coming back to Yerevan and that relations are okay. We don't have some crisis. But at the same time, speaking about the visit to Bucha and some humanitarian aid to the people of Bucha that was delivered by this delegation, they not only visited Bucha, but they also made some statements saying that Armenia is always with the people of Bucha who strived of aggression of Russia against them, etc. And they, of course, they understood very well that Bucha is one of the trigger issues for the Russia, and Russia will really react very strictly to these statements and to this visit. And they did it in purpose, because I think that this was some step to make balance when Pashinyan had to call Putin and say thank him for his help, and in the context of building the railway in the lower region that went down after the catastrophe took place there. So this was some positive thing Pashinyan had to say about Russia, and they tried to quickly balance it with something anti-Russian, not to let Armenian people think that Russia is doing something good, or that they have some good relations with Russia, etc. And of course, Russian government reacted to this visit to Bucha and the statements that were made there. Speaking about the Galuzin's statement, I think it's not a surprise for anyone that Russian government is trying to denounce the level of cooperation with Russia in the sphere of defense and military cooperation. They call it some diversification, but in general, they try to make Russia weaker in the region and to weaker the ties that are connecting Armenian military sphere with the Russia. So the interesting thing in this context is that what Armenian government is doing in the relations with Russia is scored badly both from West and both from Russia. You see, from West, they say that, okay, you are making some announcements, but in general, you don't do anything real showing that the government of Armenia is changing the political vector of Armenia. And from the Russian side, they say you are always making some statements that spread anti-Russian ideas in the society of Armenia and is worsening our relations and how Armenian society treats Russia as a government, etc. So the reason of this is that Armenian government wants to do what the West wants from them, and what they have promised to West to do to weaken relations with Russia, to weaken the Russia in the region, etc. But at the same time, Armenian economy, Armenia's defense sphere is really connected with Russia and really depends from Russia. And now they don't have any real alternative to what Russia can give to Armenia. West is not going to give Armenia some security guarantees, and the cooperation in the economic sphere with the EU cannot be an alternative to the economic cooperation with Russia because of the European standards and some other EU quotas to the agriculture, etc., etc. It means that today Armenia is not really ready to stop its relations with Russia. And this government is playing some game of showing they are making problems for Russia, but in general, not doing something really strict. And that's why this policy really don't take Armenia anyway, but worsen the relations with all players.
Anna, so you mentioned the appointment of a new ambassador from Armenia to Russia. That person's name is Gurgen Arsenyan. And as you also mentioned, for months now, that proposal has been held off by Russia. Russia has not provided an agreement to accept Gurgen Arsenyan. For our listeners, Gurgen Arsenyan's background, he's currently an MP. He is a so-called, I guess, oligarch or whatever. He has businesses, and he's one of the most fervent supporters of Pashinyan, although previously he has also supported whoever else is in power. Can you tell me the logic of appointing someone like Gurgen Arsenyan, who seems to be from a business background, but even then, now he's just an MP right now, and essentially like a mouthpiece, not just like, at least, in my opinion, at least with Hachatur Sukyasyan, for instance, he is more independent. He expresses his thoughts, but Gurgen Arsenyan seems to be always expressing the ideas of the government. So what was the logic of appointing Gurgen Arsenyan? Is it also in this thread of downgrading Armenia's relations, or is there some kind of a better relations we can expect with Gurgen Arsenyan? And also, while you're at it, tell us who is the outgoing ambassador to Russia that Arsenyan is supposed to replace.
It's really difficult to say why the government of Armenia wants to appoint Arsenyan, but I think that the main thing is that he's one who shares now their views, and at the same time he is a businessman, and they want mainly to concentrate on some economic relations, etc. But at the same time, it shows that Armenian government is not really going to develop some diplomatic relations with Russia, because Arsenyan is not the one who will be a real diplomat, or who will be ready to develop some diplomatic relations with a country as important as Russia to Armenia today, and at the same time as problematic as Armenian-Russian relations as they are today. But I think this is one of the reasons why Russian government for a long time didn't want to accept this appointment, and because in the press it's spoken for months about the Arsenyan as a candidate for the ambassador of Armenia to Russia, but we didn't have any official approval. Now it's spoken that he was approved, but again, the MFA of Armenia doesn't make any statements about this. But it shows that I think that in Russia, they understand that the appointment of Arsenyan is a new step of showing the attitude towards Russia and towards Armenian-Russian relations.
And of course, if Arsenyan's appointment is approved by Russia, he will be replacing Vagharshak Harutyunyan, someone of also similarly to me, questionable record. He was the defense minister after the end of the 44-day war, and he was responsible for signing this, secret deal where Azerbaijan got Armenian forces pulled back even more than dictated in the November 9-10 statement, resulting essentially Azerbaijan taking control of the Goris-Kapan highway, an episode that will remain for me something that must be clarified, and people must testify and stand trial for that. Besides that episode, how would you assess Vagharshak Harutyunyan's record as an ambassador?
To be honest, it's really very difficult to say anything, because we didn't see any positive work from him or any positive results he made as an ambassador, because I don't know, is it because of him, or is it because of the government of Armenia who he represents there? But in fact, we never had this kind of relations with Russia, especially with the MFA of Russia, because we never had these rhetorics in the statements they are making about Armenia. And the representatives of Armenia are not having success. Even the experts of Armenia are not reaching the success that in Russia they understand that making these kind of statements about Armenia, about our country, doesn't make any positive result for Armenian-Russian relations or for the attitude of Armenian people toward Russia, because even if the citizen of Armenia doesn't approve the policy of government, if they hate Pashinyan and his team, they don't want to hear this kind of rhetorics about their country. And the main thing that they must understand in Russia is that these words and this rhetorics is not what they need today towards Armenia and as a state. And if ambassador of Armenia doesn't succeed in this process and we have what we have today, I think it's the best evaluation of his work in general.
Right. Thanks.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention a little bit to the domestic issues. On Sunday, yesterday evening, was the most recent of the large gatherings called by Bagrat Srbazan in Yerevan. While the authorities are making every possible effort to distract from the popular movement and the discontent with the government's policies, the Srbazan movement is continuing to gather steam. Bagrat Srbazan has stated some of the goals of the movement for when they take power. First of all, regime change is a goal, and the movement has named Bagrat Srbazan as their prime minister designate. Forming a provisional government of national unity will be a priority, and holding free and fair elections after that. Hovik, I think you were there last night. Do you have any impressions from the rally that you can share?
Yes. So last night, meaning Sunday night, the major rally started Sunday night, and it was another one where the entire Republic Square was full. After the rally, the Srbazan led the procession to Bagrat Street, where the National Assembly is, and the police thwarted the movement of the protesters on Demircian Street, which is the side entrance of the National Assembly. And it is unclear if that was the goal, if the goal was to block that side entrance, because that's the common entrance that is used by MPs to enter. That was not stated by the leaders of the march. But essentially, this forced the protesters to camp out on Bagrat Street.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this rally, the Srbazan demanded that the National Assembly, upon the initiation of the parliamentary opposition, should demand Pashinyan's resignation. Note that this is not a vote of no confidence. This form of request doesn't have any legal repercussions. The Srbazan said that his movement will put the focus on resignation, but they're open to discussing all other avenues of constitutionally terminating Pashinyan's prime ministership. He has also requested that this statement or demand from the National Assembly be made in an emergency manner, demanding that the meeting for that vote to be held tomorrow, June 11th. Of course, this was rejected immediately by the civil contract majority that is part of the committee. This means that the hearing to hold a vote on demanding Pashinyan's resignation will occur on June 17th, which is the legally defined deadline for such motions. But in any case, even to send this demand for Pashinyan's resignation, you would need a majority of votes, which is 50-something votes, and the initial letter submitted by the opposition MPs for this motion contains only 33 signatures. Obviously, the civil contract, no defectors from civil contract yet. So it remains a question whether these votes are there to begin with, and civil contract majority may even try to force a quorum failure and not even hold the vote. But I believe Srbazan and his team don't have high hopes for this avenue. I would expect the next major activity to happen on June 12th, when there is a session of parliament scheduled and Pashinyan is scheduled to be present. To me personally, the goals and strategy of this movement still remain unclear, but maybe that's by design. It seems that it will be based on bringing an extraordinary amount of people to the streets, even more than we've seen so far. And I also personally think that the chance of success is not great unless we start seeing some defections from the Pashinyan team and some major oligarchs such as Hovik Manucharyan expressly switch to the Srbazan side.
Anna, do you see the necessary conditions and atmosphere for the Srbazan movement to succeed?
Today's situation is really different from what we had before, because after the 2020 we had two main movements, if I'm not mistaken, of the opposition. The first of them ended with the snap elections of the parliament, where Pashinyan again gained the majority. And the problem was that Pashinyan resigned, but his team continued to rule, and he also continued to rule the country, and he was the one to organize the elections. And he really his main opposition was Khojali, and he really used this thesis that if no, you don't choose me, you choose the ones that were before me, with whom we struggled and made for what we made revolution. And so if you don't choose me, you make something against the revolution that was made, etc. Yes. And after that, during the previous year, we had again this movement of opposition, when really the main parties of opposition united and made some really big demonstrations, and a lot of people was on the streets. But at the same time, many people who didn't share the views of Pashinyan and who wanted some changes in Armenia, etc., they didn't come out to the street, saying that when Khojali and Sargsyan are in the street, we are not going to join them, and we are not going to the streets because this will bring them again to the power. And this movement is really different from what we had before, because there is no underlined political presence in the streets. Yes, all opposition parties are on the streets, all people or representatives of the different political positions are on the streets, but at the same time, none of the leaders of the opposition we saw before as the main speakers none of them are on the stage, and none of even Khojali and Sargsyan are not taking part to these demonstrations. They are not going out, they are not showing, etc., giving a chance to the opposition to unite and to make the change in the country. And that's why this movement is really different from what we had before. The second thing is the government is always saying that the only thing opposition wants is power, and because they want to come to the power again, they want money they had before, and now they cannot earn, etc., etc. And Srbazan is saying that we are going to make this non-political government that will just organize the elections, and we are not going to take part in these elections. It means they are not now, they don't want power. They are not on the streets because of their will of power. And this is the second thing that is really very important, and that is breaking the stereotypes. And the third thing is that the church is playing a very important role, because before this, there were a lot of representatives of opposition spoke about we are not uniting because we don't have a leader who can unite all us together, because we have some different views, etc., etc. And they saw that the church maybe can play the role of the leader of some movement and can unite all the people who don't agree with what Pashinyan is doing. And now really church took this role, and they are trying to unite people, not having any political wills. And if not this, then what? This means that if people don't unite in this situation, if they don't participate in the processes that are going on the streets, that means just these people don't want the change, or they don't want to be the one who brings this change. They want to be someone who is looking with popcorn of what is happening with their country. And this means that all the things they said, why they are not participating in these protests, were just some strategies, but didn't have anything real by them. So I think that we have all the points we didn't have before. And the worst thing is that if we don't have result now, this means that it will be very difficult to understand what we must have in the future that will bring a real change and will bring some, will really defeat Pashinyan in the future. And this means that Pashinyan will feel him even stronger. And this means that the demands of the Azerbaijan will be growing and growing, understanding that Pashinyan can do everything they want and nothing will happen to his power, and Armenian society will not go against it.
Anna, one of the things that I left out, and I want to ask it to you as a question, a common thesis of what happened in 2018 is the foreign policy aspect, where it's widely believed that Serj Sarkisyan was not, I guess, convenient, was not acceptable to all of the foreign powers, whether it's the West or the East, whether it's Russia or the US. And we saw that in terms of the when the marches started, we saw that in terms of the huge spike in content produced by Asbed Bedrossian TV and foreign funded channels. We also, surprisingly or ironically, saw many Gazprom employees. Gazprom is a Russian enterprise on the streets protesting. So could that also be an explanation where essentially Bagrat Srbazan, despite being alleged to be a spy, he's essentially none of the Western or none of the major superpowers are interested in regime change in Armenia right now. And of course, Turkey and Azerbaijan are actively discussing how to support Pashinyan in case a regime change becomes an actual threat. So how would you address that aspect of the current movement?
I will not agree with the point that Serj Sarkisyan was not accepted with any of the foreign players and foreign powers. But yes, we see that in the 2018, all the foreign powers tried to have their dividends from what was going on in Armenia. For example, the West saw Pashinyan and his teams as a liberal party that was sharing their ideas, and they understood that it will be really easy for them to make business with him. And Russia, in this context, for example, the presence of Gazprom's workers in protest, etc., showed that Russia also didn't want to lose a chance to have some ties with the new Armenian government, because they understood that something is really changing in Armenia. And you also spoke about some oligarchs taking part in the protest, etc., and some hopes that they will take part also now. I will say that, yes, today, this situation differs, because the West is really interested in the continuation of the power of Pashinyan, because they cooperate with him against Russia, and he is playing their game in this region. And but at the same, and Azerbaijan and Turkey, of course, they are happy having Pashinyan as a power in Armenia, because none other, it's very difficult to think that we can have other government that will do whatever they want him to do. But at the same time, these aspects, maybe they can be important, but if we have as many people on the streets as is needed for a general change, all external players will have to take it into account and will be forced to cooperate with them, because if Armenian society really wants a new government, foreign players will have to find some ties with that government to realize their interests and not to lose their positions in Armenia, in the region, etc. So yes, if they don't show their support today to this movement, they will have to cooperate with that movement if the movement has result and changes the power in Armenia. And also it's important that Bagrat Srbazan had also announced his vision of the cooperation with foreign players. He made also his statement to the Friends of Armenia abroad, saying that he is not going to make policy against anyone. He wants to cooperate transparently and to be a normal partner both for the West and for the Russia.
So within the context of what you just said, Anna, there is, of course, the US and the EU governments that have flat out ignored the police brutality towards protesters. And I'm wondering if we can explain that attitude from these champions of human rights and democracy as their interest and support, whether implicit or explicit, for the Pashinyan government.
Yes, generally we see very big difference in what happened in 2018 and what is happening now, because then the same Azatutun radio station was speaking loudly about any case that took place on the streets and any brutality against demonstrators, etc. And now we see that West is trying not to see what's going in Armenia, to really ignore what's happening. And we see huge brutality against protesters on the streets, and West doesn't want to see what's going on, and they don't want to remember about their values in this context. And this is, I don't want to say that this is support to Pashinyan, but they are not against the continuation of power of Pashinyan, because he had made some promises to them, and they want these promises to come true and to come to their end. And they don't want Armenia to change its policy, because any external player is playing by its interests, and they are not really thinking about interests of Armenia. Armenia and Armenian government must make them to take into consideration the interests of Armenia and to cooperate them by the interests of Armenia. If nowadays Armenia's government is not doing it, and it's very easy for the West to have Pashinyan as a government of Armenia, and to that helps them to improve their positions in the region and to make a new sphere of conflict with Russia. And that's why they are trying not to react to what is going in Armenia, to wait and to see where the processes are going. That doesn't mean that new government of Armenia, if Srbazan really has a good result, will have some problems with the West. No, they will try to cooperate with him too, especially if he doesn't make some anti-Western statements or anti-Western policy. But now they are trying to wait and to see what's going on and where the processes are going.
Okay, let's wrap up our topics here. I'd like to ask each of you, as usual, if there's something on your mind from the past week or two that you would like to share with us. Hovik, something you would like to share?
Yeah, so if you remember last year, the civil contract controlled parliament passed this change to the Armenian criminal code on active remorse. This is a Soviet hand-me-down law where if a accused expresses active remorse and accepts their crime, the prosecutor has a authority to stop the prosecution. Previously, this law was only for low and medium crimes. But last year, the Civil Contract Parliament, curiously, it changed this to also apply for grave and especially grave crimes. And guess who are some of the first people, at least the first people that I've seen in the news, who have been essentially taken off the hook, for crimes like this? It is Alen Simonyan's sister-in-law, who also along with the former deputy minister of economy were essentially accused of corruption and embezzlement. And the government that is carrying the flag of corruption or anti-corruption everywhere, that is saying that Armenia is a bastion of democracy, that there is no systemic corruption in Armenia, has decided to let go of these individuals because they supposedly expressed very, very active remorse. I don't know how that active remorse manifested itself. And also, I'm pretty sure that any relation with Alen Simonyan is completely coincidental. So please, people, don't even go there.
Anna, what's on your mind?
I'll underline something that is not strictly connected with Armenia, but the interesting thing we have now and makes us think about the changes in the world is the results of the parliamentary elections in EU, the results of the elections in European Parliament, showing that the people of EU are not really sharing the active policy of EU in the world, and they have some great disagreements with their governments and with the policy of EU in general. And I think this is mainly also connected with this EU's engagement in Ukraine and in the crisis and conflict with Russia. And I think that the strong positions of the right-wing and nationalist and Eurosceptic powers that increased their positions during these elections will really make the leaders of EU to change their views and to make some corrections in their policy. And I think that this will also have its result for Armenia too, and especially like today I read some analysis about what can change in EU. And for example, they underlined that maybe the migration policy of EU will become even more strict. And today, the main thing that the pro-governmental media are speaking about is that Armenia is going to get some visa liberalization with EU if we are a good student in this process. This shows that maybe this will not happen in the near perspective. And in general, the European perspective for Armenia may be even slower, and the hopes that Armenian government has with EU are not going to be implemented in the near future. And Macron and other friends of Pashinyan and in the EU will be more concentrated on their internal problems they have now.
All right, we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you, Anna, for your time.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
That was our show today, recorded on June 10, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Anna Karapetyan, who is the director of the Insight Analytical Center for Applied Policy and Research. She has a PhD in political sciences and is a lecturer at the Russian Armenian University. Please remember to support us. Go to our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and become a sustaining member of Groong and give monthly. Thank you in advance. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.